I grew up in southern Indiana to Christian, politically conservative parents, and was kind of given an invisible rule book on how I was supposed to be a girl. And I grew up with a Southern Lady Addendum, which is an additional set of rules, right? And I did my best to follow those rules, but it was a fight, and it was a fight with my mom, and that usually came up at the beginning of a school year when it was time to buy school clothes, right? And I wanted to wear boys' clothes, and my mom was like, you can't wear boys' shirts because they button on the opposite side and people will be able to tell. And one is, I'm like, if people are close enough to my buttons to be able to tell, that is a problem, right? I wanted to wear boys' shoes. My third grade teacher and I had the same size shoe, so it was hard to get shoes that I could kind of play in. And again, there was much that I couldn't do because of appearance to other folks, right? So fast forward, I was working at Cornell University as their textbook buyer, and it was spring of 1994, and I found out that we were going to be bringing in two authors, and it got talked to me as kind of two lesbian authors. One was Minnie Bruce Pratt, who had written a book called She/He, and one was Leslie Feinberg, who had written Stone Butch Blues. And I was so excited, and we had also set up for them to do a book signing. And so I went the first night to hear Minnie Bruce, and She/He is this great book of poetry that really was a love story to her relationship with Leslie Feinberg. And then the second day was Leslie Feinberg. Leslie Feinberg had just written and published Stone Butch Blues, right? So Leslie came out. I don't think there's any way you're going to see this picture, but there's a picture on the back, right, which is the Leslie that walked out on stage, which is flat top, gray, double-breasted pinstripe suit, crisp white shirt, beautifully tied long tie, gold wedding band, and shiny, shiny shoes, men's shoes, right? And I couldn't believe it, right? I couldn't believe that that somebody who, my assumption, ever a danger, but is correct, has an F on their birth certificate, could be so handsome, right? And so I still don't have words kind of all these years later, but I was like, my mom had told me I wouldn't be successful if I didn't conform to gender norms. And here was somebody who had written a book, who was being paid to come to an Ivy League school to speak. And I was like, my mama lied, right? So the other thing that was going through my head, though, is that Leslie and Minnie Bruce were coming to the bookstore the next day to do a book signing, and that we'd been talking it up as kind of two lesbians coming in. And I, in my own internalized kind of transphobia, right, was like, what are people going to do when Leslie shows up in the bookstore? So I was on a high and a glow about meeting Leslie, and then really concerned about what was going to happen the next day. So the next day I ran into work. I was like, just so you know, when Leslie spoke, right, explained all that had happened. But when Leslie walked into the bookstore, Leslie was in flowy pants and a silk shirt, and was so kind and generous and loving. And so I got to host them at the table, which meant I got to ask them all kinds of questions between people coming in and getting their book signed. I have signed copies of She/He and Stone Butch Blues. And basically, I started reading the book. I called in sick the next day because my world was turned upside down about what was possible in my life. And I got rid of all my women's clothes. The local drag community was happy to get some of my larger slingback shoes. And a local department store was super stoked about all the shirts and ties that I purchased there. They would have there would be a call out, Shane and his partner have entered the building. All salespeople, please come to menswear. So I retooled my wardrobe, was living authentically as who I am. And it was bumpy, to be honest, right? Like it didn't all go quite as planned. My parents, I would feel good about myself, right? And then my parents would kind of knock me down. And so, I had a really accepting partner at the time, and that was helpful. I found an amazing therapist, and that was helpful. I did the best I could to take good care of myself, and kind of had to unlearn all that I had learned and find that I was good, right? And one of the ways that I was able to do that, and I have to admit, like I had economic privilege in the fact that of my job and my partner's job, I was able to go to some early trans conferences, and one of them was called True Spirit. And True Spirit happened in Baltimore, and I have the feeling the first year I went probably was 1996. And lo and behold, Leslie Feinberg was back as the keynote speaker. And that speech is in a book that's a compilation of Here's Talks. So I, heard Leslie speak again, waited and stood in line afterwards, like practicing the speech of, how Leslie changed my life and what the book had meant, and meeting her at Cornell, right? So wait in line, get up, tell Leslie all the things. And Leslie just looks up at me and said, nice flat top, right? And I was like, oh my God, my hair has been blessed by the gender pope, right? And then I, went over and had a chance to talk to Minnie Bruce and said that I had changed my name to Shane and, said, man, that suits you. I was like, good, right? And then the last bit that happened at that conference was there was a breakout session, right? And the room was packed, right? People standing room only along the sides. And the conversation was about language, right? And how gendered language was and how it felt for us to get misgendered, and a big hate session on being called lady. And you could hear people sniffling in the room, right? You could hear people being so moved and so touched by both being in community and in the conversation. And I just remember Leslie taking a pause and saying, all right, everybody, right? Like I so appreciate the feeling that's in here, and I just want you to stop and think a minute, right? And just remember that you will never feel as alone again after experiencing this time in this room together, right? And I probably wasn't crying before then, but I'm pretty sure that the tears started flowing at that point. So after hearing that, I realized that I too would never feel as alone after being in that room and having that experience. That there are times that I go back and remember those moments of being in community and how important that is.